is 2020.
Next, if you need potentially life-saving treatment, will your health plan cover it? Not necessarily, as this family found out. Dr. Timothy Johnson with a rare inside look at how insurance company makes life and death decisions. Stay with us.
Now a case that made big headlines, not just because of the extraordinary decision reached by the jury, but because it gave us a rare window into the workings of the insurance industry. Imagine being told your health plan won't cover the only treatment that might extend your life. Well, that would be hard enough. But what if the insurers refused to pay so they could line their own pockets? That is the allegation made by the family you're about to meet. As Dr. Timothy Johnson reports, their story may save lives, though they lost the one they cherished most.
In June of 1991, Nelene Fox began a journey that finally ended here just a year ago. It was a journey not only marked by terrible tragedy, but one that raises questions for all Americans about how insurance companies make life and death decisions.
5 years ago, when these home movies were taken, Nelene Fox's youngest daughter, Jenna, was celebrating her first birthday, and Nelene was healthy and happy. By Christmas, 2 years later, Nelene was living with breast cancer. Her life with her husband, Jim, and her 3 daughters had been completely disrupted. She had had both breasts removed, and she was receiving chemotherapy. But her brother, Mark Hiepler, says the chemotherapy did not work.
They did a bone marrow biopsy and found out that the standard chemotherapy had been ineffective and that the disease was now in her bone marrow.
By this time, Mark was heavily involved with Nelene's medical care. That was not surprising, since Mark and Nelene had been close since they were children, even though she was 9 years older. When he graduated from law school in 1988, she was there taking the pictures.
Mark! Mark!
She helped me through law school. I stayed with her. She gave me the bar exam results, had a party for me, baked a cake. So we'd always been very close, long before cancer.
Nelene's oncologist was Dr. Elber Camacho, a cancer specialist who was part of the referral system of the Fox's insurance company. When the cancer spread to Nelene's bone marrow, Dr. Camacho told the Foxes there was another option if she qualified.
It would make sense to then try a bone marrow procedure, bone marrow transplant procedure, to try to see if we could prolong her life that way.
The procedure Dr. Camacho was suggesting, bone marrow transplant, is controversial. Insurance companies often refuse to pay for these expensive procedures for breast cancer patients on the grounds they are not yet proven. However, many experts say they are already proven to be the best treatment for many advanced cases. But the issue in Nelene's case was not just the medical debate. In her case, the bigger question became whether her insurance company treated her fairly or simply tried to increase their profits by denying her insurance coverage.
One, now skip a line.
Jim Fox, Nelene's husband, got his family's medical insurance through the school system where he taught. Their insurance company was HealthNet, the second largest HMO in California.
In April of 1992, Nelene Fox was referred here to the Norris Cancer Center at USC. After extensive testing, the doctors decided she would be a good candidate for a transplant. The Foxes thought HealthNet would pay for it, but they were wrong.
As a result, Mark Hiepler was to dramatically change his role in his sister's case. Up to now, he had been a loving and supportive brother. He was soon to become Nelene's lawyer.
On June 12th, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had faxed to my office a letter that Jim had received saying that HealthNet had chosen to label this procedure experimental and that it was not a covered benefit under Nelene's contract.
And what did you do next?
I said, well, I think we just write a letter and I'll explain that it's a covered benefit. Here's what your contract says. This is the one you marketed to her when she was well. Please perform now that she's ill.
1 week later, Mark filed a lawsuit against HealthNet, accusing them of bad faith, including deceptive practices, coercion of Dr. Camacho, and a financial conflict of interest. The target of the conflict of interest charge was Dr. Clifford Osorio, the medical director of HealthNet, who rejected Nelene. Dr. Osorio is responsible for decisions on transplants at HealthNet. The company refused repeated requests for an interview, although they did provide written statements and these pictures of Dr. Osorio. At the time of the rejection letter, Dr. Camacho says Dr. Osorio called him about Nalene's case. Following the call from Dr. Osorio, Dr. Camacho met with the Foxes. They were stunned to discover that Dr. Camacho no longer seemed to support the transplant.
I felt that he had changed his mind because he made the statement to us when I asked him, well, what should we do at this point? He said, you ought to take the few months you have remaining and spend that together.
This apparent change was especially surprising to the Foxes, since Dr. Camacho had just written 2 strong letters supporting a transplant.
Now, I have to say, as a physician reading that, it sounds more than just a request for insurance support. It sounds like support for the procedure.
Correct. And again, I have been hammered with this letter, and it has to be viewed why I did the letter. Okay. I am writing a letter in support of the patient to the insurance, hoping that the insurance would pay for the procedure.
At the trial, HealthNet and Dr. Camacho denied that Dr. Osorio pressured him to change his position. But Jim Fox and the family strongly disagrees.
I think he'd been influenced.
By the conversation with Dr. Osorio?
Yes.
Given the situation with HealthNet, friends of Nelene Fox organized a fundraising drive. They raised over $200,000, enough money to pay for the transplant.
It's hard to say you look forward to a procedure like this, and yet I know that this is where my hope is. And
Nelene finally had the transplant in August. Unfortunately, in March, it was learned that Nalene's cancer had spread to her liver, and she quickly went downhill.
And ultimately, she passed away on what date?
It was April 22nd. 2 days before I was deposing the man that denied her the treatment, and my secretary called and interrupted the deposition, and she said that Nelene had collapsed. And so I got into a car from LA and immediately went out there. And 2 days later, on April 22nd, she actually died.
Mm-hmm. Were you with her at the time of her death?
Yeah, I was holding her hand. I come to you not as an attorney, but first and foremost...
His sister's death only heightened Mark Hiepler's determination to continue the lawsuit against HealthNet. By the time her case actually came to trial here in the Riverside County Courthouse last November, 7 months after Nalene's death, Mark Hiepler had made some critical discoveries that he presented to the jury. Exhibit A, the bonus plans at HealthNet.
HealthNet has annual revenues of well over $1 billion a year, and it is very much a for-profit company. Executives can make a bonus if the company makes more money, and one of the ways the company can make more money is to deny costly care.
In preparation for the trial, Mark Hiepler uncovered 2 bonus plans. One was right in Dr. Osorio's contract.
His employment contract has a bonus based on how well the company does. Now, that alone, I believe, puts Dr. Osorio in a conflict of interest because to the degree that he can deny treatments, there's an incentive for him personally in his contract.
HealthNet claims the second bonus plan was never implemented, but Mark Hiepler says the executive who hired Dr. Osorio indicated otherwise in his deposition.
He said, yeah, there's another bonus because in 1990 we became a for-profit company. And I said, does that bonus allow Dr. Osorio to personally benefit from denials of bone marrow transplants? And I went specifically for breast cancer patients. He said, yes, it does. However, knowing Dr. Osorio and his long-term view, he would never allow that to affect his decision.
Exhibit B, arbitrary decision-making. A critical witness in the trial was Janet Bosworth, seen in these home movies with her son and husband. She also had breast cancer, and she was also insured by HealthNet.
And she walked up there nearly 2 years after her bone marrow transplant and most convincingly said that I was paid for by HealthNet.
Mrs. Bosworth was a particularly compelling witness since she had actually worked for HealthNet as a top salesperson. Her husband, Stephen, says HealthNet tried to keep his wife from getting a transplant by trying to convince the doctor at a referral center not to even tell them about the procedure. And he says that delayed needed treatment. Finally, Bosworth threatened to sue, and he is convinced to this day that it was that threat that made HealthNet pay.
Oh, absolutely. They would not have. They would have done everything. They would have continued their tricks to stall and stall until it was too late and she would not have been able to have the treatment.
At the trial, HealthNet claimed they treated Mrs. Bosworth fairly and that they paid for her transplant as a, quote, gift only because she was such a valued employee.
No, a very valued employee, they claimed. This was no gift because she was a valued employee.
Exhibit C, inadequate research. Often, before making a decision, an insurance company will talk to the doctor recommending a transplant. But other than Dr. Camacho, who did Dr. Osorio consult in making his decision to say no? He admitted at the trial that he never even spoke to Dr. Aziz Khan, the cancer specialist at Norris Cancer Center, who had concluded that Nelene Fox was a candidate for the procedure.
I do not get a call from any of the insurance people. We do get...
They never call you?
They never called us.
Not then or ever?
Not then or ever.
HealthNet claimed that Dr. Osorio did speak to this man, Dr. William Peters of Duke University, one of the world's leading authorities on bone marrow transplants. They claim Dr. Peters said Nelene would not be a good candidate for a bone marrow transplant. But Dr. Peters told 2020 a different story.
I don't recall any conversation with Dr. Osorio, and I don't think that's not the way we do business to make recommendations about what the appropriate treatment for a patient is without a full evaluation of the patient.
Mark Hiepler's arguments, the inadequate research, the bonus plan, arbitrary decisions, the contract, all helped convince the jury. In fact, they were so convinced that according to jury foreman Bob Bowen, when they finally began their deliberations after 3 weeks of testimony, the jurors were shouting out their feelings.
Do they think we're dummies? Do they think we really believe them? Do they believe what Osorio was saying? Don't they think that we're aware that possibly they were saving money by denying the treatment, and therefore there would be more money for bonuses?
On December 23rd, the jury gave Mark Hiepler and the Fox family a tremendous victory. They voted against HealthNet on 9 counts, including breach of contract for refusing to pay for the transplant, intentionally inflicting emotional distress on Jim Fox, and oppression, malice, and fraud in how they treated the Foxes. But the jury still had to finally decide on the total amount of damages. On December 28th, after only an hour and a half of deliberation, the jury here at the Riverside County Courthouse announced its punitive damages verdict. Attorney Mark Hiepler had urged the jury to send a message to the insurance industry. And the jury sent an $89 million message that was heard by insurance executives all over the country.
Nelene's death won't be in vain because her story, her message is getting out to people, and we've exposed the conflicts of interest in managed care. We've exposed some of the hidden secrets about bonuses, about incentives, about how there's a conflict of interest between the guy that's supposed to be looking after your best interests and the money he's going to make.
I have the honor and the privilege of working with people like Nelene.
And for Mark, this crusade is far from over.
Then after the verdict, I think one of the articles said that, they asked, what kind of champagne did you have, and where did you go to party, and after the first verdict, and I said, in all honesty, I hadn't seen the placard on her grave, so I went out there and felt kind of like we at least completed the first part of the mission on her behalf.
That could be tragic. But, Tim, in view of the fact that we can't automatically afford to extend every new technology to everybody, don't we have to make some kind of hard decisions at times in these cases?
Absolutely, but we need scientific data to help us make those hard decisions about what really works, what doesn't, and we're collecting that data now in terms of bone marrow transplants for breast cancer cases. We didn't focus on that medical controversy. We focused on the process by which insurance companies make the decision, and this case raises some very real questions about how an insurance company might act with financial conflict of interest, without good research, arbitrary flipping the coins kind of decisions. Americans know we have to make decisions, but I think they want them made in open, honest, consistent fashion without financial incentives.
And in this case, there was a new development just last week.
Yes, HealthNet had, of course, appealed the jury verdict, but last week the parties agreed to settle out of court. They are working out the details of those settlement now, and they will be confidential.
You hate to see this kind of problem rooted in human misery.
Oh,
That's
yes.
really
Makes it much more complicated.
Thank you, Tim.